Hey everybody, it's Miss Segovia, and I'm here to give you the short and sweet version of all things you need to know ecology. So hopefully you're sitting with your ecology notes out in front of you. We're going to go through part A here first, ecology basics. So what is ecology? It's the study of the interactions between organisms and the living and non-living components of their environment. Most people really like learning about ecology because all you have to do is look out your front window to see what's going on. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper and identify some of those parts here. When we look at ecology in biology, we like to kind of organize things, similar to when we did taxonomy with kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. In ecology, we have biosphere, biome, ecosystems, communities, populations, and organisms. Now, I don't have a cool acronym to help you understand that or remember that one, so if you can come up with a cool saying, then let me know and we'll be happy to share that. So let's start first with the largest of them, the biosphere. This is the thin volume of Earth and its atmosphere that supports life. I'm going to pop ahead here real quick to the picture. Biosphere is looking basically at the entire planet. Right beneath that we have the biome, major habitat area, either terrestrial on land or aquatic in the waters. So savanna, tundra, ocean, those are those ones you got to study when you were in middle school. You know, we're going to study the desert. Ecosystems are all the organisms and non-living things in a particular place. So what's the difference between bio and ecosystem? Basically the weather, looking at the different climates. So ecosystem is just looking at specifically the creatures that live there, and then like the rocks and trees and anything else that's around. Going a little bit more in depth, we have communities, all the interacting populations in the area. Communities is looking at only the living things. We kind of stack on here. So when we were looking at ecosystems, we added the non-living. Communities is just the living. Populations is looking at the members of a single species that live in one place at one time. And so you can think of it when we're talking about the population of Irving, we're talking generally about just the human population of Irving, not taking into account other species. If we were feeling kind of odd, we could go and study the cockroach population of Irving, or the horse population, or a specific species of bird population. Organisms then are the individual living thing. You are an organism in a population of humans who lives in a community, thereby interacting with other living things. And then your ecosystem is including the non-living things. The biome includes the weather, and the biosphere is everything all together. So here's a pretty little graphic to help you with that: individual, population, community, ecosystem, biome, and biosphere. Again, the real important to pay attention to whether we're talking about the living factors, the combination of living and non-living, and then living, non-living, and the weather, so on and so forth. So what are those biotic and abiotic factors? Biotic factors are living and abiotic factors are non-living. So our biotic ones are like the predators. It could be diseases like the bacteria, the parasites, anything that's considered alive. Abiotic is looking at like the temperature, the humidity, precipitation, things that come into play, but they're not actually living themselves. When we study our living things, we like to look at the niche. It looks like niche or niche or whatever, but we pronounce it usually niche or niche. The niche is the role an organism plays in its environment. It includes the habitat, the ways of obtaining nutrients, etc. Every creature has two niches. A fundamental niche is the range and resources a species could use and tolerate, whereas the realized niche is where it actually does use and tolerate. And so we tend to get confused a little bit. Is the species habitat the same as its niche? Well, a species habitat is where it lives as part of it. Just because you happen to be there doesn't mean that that's like your entire niche. So the fact that a lizard lives in a desert is part of its niche, but we also have to take into consideration everything it does in that area. So whether we're talking about, like in the lizard example, the way it's sunning, the methods of catching insects. If you're talking about humans, it's like, what do you do here? What's your actual like behavior and purpose? Also come into play with the niche. So it's not just the habitat, but it's also what are you doing in this habitat. We also have to take into consideration the tolerance levels. Each organism has an upper and lower limit for survival. And so here's the trout. They ideally live at about 13 degrees centigrade, but they can go as high as 21 degrees centigrade. And so they can survive slightly lower temps, but they don't do too good if you get too hot. We humans, we have a pretty big tolerance, and mostly because we can also add clothes and change our behaviors and stuff like that to deal with the heat or the cold. And other things, though, will have very tiny tolerance levels, and they can only go a couple degrees up or down. Also within niches, we have two big categories, the generalists and the specialists. So generalists are species with really broad niches. Possums and raccoons, cockroaches have a huge niche. Things that, if we moved them to a new environment, would they be able to survive it? Those guys, they're very versatile, very hardy, and they will just deal with whatever comes their way. Specialists, on the other hand, have very narrow, very specific things that they must have. They're the picky creatures of the planet. And so if you're looking at a koala, they have to eat the eucalyptus. That is their diet. Pandas, they have to eat the bamboo. That's the only thing that they eat and the only thing that it can digest. Now, if you're paying attention to what we're talking about here, our specialists are usually the creatures that we see on the endangered species list, or those that have already gone extinct. They had very specific needs, and they could only find those in very specific spaces, and if something gets messed up with those, habitat destruction, a natural disaster, something comes in, they're done. Whereas a generalist, they can adapt, they can change. If you think of cockroaches, they're going to live far longer than the humans will, and they'll make do and be okay. So folks, that concludes our part A for ecology basics. Go ahead and stop this one and move on to part B, ecological succession.